Merhaba arkadaşlar. Umarım herkes için oldukça güzel geçen bir akşam olacaktır. Ben hem İngilizce hem Türkçe konuşacağım. Kısaca bir akıştan da bahsedecek olursak, ilk önce Yan anlatacak. Yaklaşık 30 dakika kadar bir sunum olacak. Devamında sorularımızı sorabileceğiz. 10 dakika veya birazcık daha uzun olabilir. Sizden gelecek sorulara ve yorumlara bağlı olarak. Dinlerken özellikle mikrofonunuzu kapatarak dinlerseniz hem aradaki seslerle kesilmemiş olur, dikkatimiz dağılmamış olur, daha rahat ederiz. Devamında sorularınızı chatten sorabilirsiniz veya sesli olarak sorabilirsiniz. Yaklaşık 1 saat kadar Yan bizimle olacak. Daha sonra Gökhan bizlerle olacak ve bir örnek portfolyo üzerinden beraber inceleyeceğiz. Nasıl olmalı, neleri göstermeliyiz, hangi bilgiyi nasıl gösteririz, bu gibi şeylere bakacağız. Daha sonra Özge Özer bizlerle beraber olacak. Şu an bizimle beraber. Onunla beraber de UX Researcher portfolyosu nasıl olur ve Özge'nin portfolyosu nasılmış, neler yapmış, bunları nasıl göstermiş, tüm bunları konuşacağız. Herkes hazırsa, now it's in English. Hello friends, welcome here. I hope you had a great day. We are going to talk about portfolio design tonight. Why is that so important? How to show our work the best way we can do it. And we have Jan Haaland. Probably you know him from Case Study Club. This is one of my favorite websites. I'm very excited to listen, actually. Jan, hello, welcome. Maybe would you like to start? Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Yeah, I actually do that in the slides. I can pull up my deck and then go from there. But thank you so much for that nice introduction.
Thank you. So we are ready.
Okay, cool. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen.
All right.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me here tonight. So everyone here from Turkey?
Yes, probably yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But most of them can understand English.
Okay, yes, that's good. So my name is Jan and I live in Norway with my wife and 2 kids. So for living, I work as a UX designer with a consultancy agency called Webstep. And I actually got started with all of this back in the 90s, designing a fan site for a punk rock band called The Clash. And now, 20 something years later, I've swapped out the punk rock bands with the tech products. And also on the nights and weekends, I run as IREM. Is it IREM or IREM?
Yeah, but both of them is fine.
Okay.
In exchange years, people call me Iram. I get it.
IREM.
Yeah.
Okay. So as IREM said, I run Case Study Club. So I've been doing that for the past 5 years. And during that time, I've also connected with and helped hundreds of designers with their portfolios, case studies, interview challenges, and also the overall hiring process. And I've interviewed people like Simon Pant, Tobias van Schneider, and the people from Ueno, who's infamous for writing amazing case studies before they were acquired by Twitter last year. So yeah, that's my short intro. So I'll just briefly look at what we'll cover today. So we only have 30 minutes, so I might have to skip the last part, but if not, I'll try to cover it briefly if we're out of time. So will you give me a heads up, Irem, when we're getting close to the 30-minute mark?
Sure.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so what we'll cover is the 2 types of portfolios that you should be aware of and where they fit into the hiring process, and also the art of writing case studies and how you can communicate your value effectively. And also, lastly, the most common designer challenge and how to overcome it. So before we get started, I'm not some guru who's going to tell you exactly what to do. So I want you to take what I sort of preach and teach and make it into your own thing. And also, this is going to be 50% strategy and 50% tactics, which is usually what I prefer when I watch workshops like this. So I incorporate it into this myself, and also might pronounce some word weird because I'm Norwegian. And I'm going to help you design a portfolio that is relevant to your level of experience. So maybe could we get some people in the chat just write what level you're at, or if you're a mid-level senior designer or entry-level designer, because that's always a good junior. Okay, yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Either junior, senior.
Entry level, junior. Yeah, because then I can sort of maybe tailor the content more towards juniors, entry level. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this is actually what a portfolio used to look like back in the days. That's like 10, 15 years ago. And if you Google portfolio, the actual definition is a large, thin, flat case of loose sheets of paper for drawings and maps. And I used to have one just like this back in the days, and I carried it around and presented it on the spot, and it was absolutely brutal. So yeah, I had to basically print my UI and mount them on large cardboards, and the bigger meant better, obviously. But luckily, things have changed since then. So Aircom says Diamond, Elite, Platinum plus Designer. That's awesome. So now let's take a look at the two types of portfolio that you should be aware of. So to understand what those two types are, I'm going to cover what the hiring process looks like right now. Is also relevant across the globe, basically. So if you're hiring in Europe or in the US or in Australia, this is basically what the hiring process looks like. So you'll first have a screening call with a recruiter, usually on the phone and sometimes through Zoom. This is a 15-minute call where the most common questions are, could you tell me about yourself and why do you want this role? It's also worth noting that there are two types of recruiters. There are the internal recruiter and also the external recruiter. And the external recruiter tend to be a little bit more on your side because they have incentives to get you further along in the hiring process. Then you'll have, if you pass the screening call, you'll move into the first on-site or Zoom interview. This is a 1-hour interview with a design manager, hiring manager, team lead, etc. And the recruiter might also join in on this. And this is where you'll go a bit more in depth about you, and they'll also tell you about them. And it's also a perfect opportunity for you to ask them questions. Then there's various other sort of interview formats. You have take-home assignments, you have whiteboard challenges, and you have the portfolio review. These can either be done in conjunction or they could be spread throughout into different sections of the hiring process. But if they're done in conjunction, then you'll present your assignment together with 1 or 2 pieces from your portfolio. And after that, there might be a second on-site interview, and these are usually done with the director, CTO, and even the CEO if it's a startup, small startup. And at the end, it's all about the offer, negotiation, and also acceptance. So you see, getting a job these days is almost a full-time job in itself, and the order, as I said, of this might vary. So you could have like a take-home assignment early in the process and then a portfolio review later in the process, and so on. And in larger companies such as Google, the process can stretch out for months and months. I've heard of it can actually take up to like 6, 7, 8, 9, and even a year. I've heard some people go through this. So yeah, it can be draining. In smaller companies, though, it's not that time consuming, usually maybe a couple of weeks, a week. So yeah. So let's see where the portfolio fit in to this. So you'll have The first two occurrences of your portfolio will be asynchronous, meaning that the portfolio will be viewed without your presence. So that will typically be a portfolio website, or in some cases, a portfolio deck with supportive copy on the slide. And before you've even be considered for the screening call, the recruiter might spend 10 seconds on your portfolio tops. And then if you passed on to the first on-site interview, the designers or hiring managers who will be interviewing you might spend a couple of minutes on it if you're lucky. So if you're a senior, lead, or director designer, then the portfolio might not even be necessary at this stage. But so you'll be covered basically by your resume, and that will be the proof of what your experience is. But if you're junior or mid, then I think you won't get away with not having a portfolio at this stage. And then there's the synchronous portfolio. This is usually presented with your presence. It is usually a portfolio deck, but with less supportive text or copy on the slides, because you'll be doing the talking and the deck will sort of function as something for them to rest their eyes on. And I hear about designers going into the portfolio review with the website, but it's easy to get sidetracked if you do that. So instead, if you make a deck, it's much easier to control the flow of the conversation, and you're not constantly scrolling up and down, clicking around and discussing things that's not relevant. And also, it's better if this is a more visual presentation, because you don't want to be reading off the screen. And I recommend using a tool like Keynote or Google Slides, where you can have presenter notes, which I have right here right now, so I can look in the camera and also read notes below it. So it makes for a much more nicer experience for the people who are viewing your presentation. Okay, so to summarize, you have the asynchronous portfolio, either a website or a deck used in the early stages without your presence. And then there's the synchronous portfolio. We'll do the actual presentation in the later stages of the hiring process. Okay, we're pressed on time, so I'm just going to run through it.
It's fine with the time. We are okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. That's good. So the art of writing case studies. This is the juicy part. So I interviewed Simon Pan, who's infamous for the perfecting the pickup case study. If you haven't read it, you should check that out. When I've interviewed him, he said two great things that really stood out to me, and that was that you should communicate that you have the skills to do the job. But the first one is kind of obvious, but still it's important that you incorporate that. But the second one is more interesting, and that is to create curiosity about yourself, so they start to envision where you might fit into the team. Okay, so if you can do that, then I think you've nailed it on the head, basically. So also, I interviewed Ueno. As I said, they're infamous for creating really nice case studies. You should also check those out. Those are more design agency case studies, so they're not that in depth in terms of the process. They're more leaning towards the output, but also the outcome of their projects. So, and also they're talking nicely about their clients and et cetera, et cetera. So you should check those out for inspiration at least. But yeah, I talked to their copywriter, and they actually have an entire team working on they used to have a team work on their case studies, and their budget. Can anyone guess their budget for a case study? It's in the US dollars. Just write it in the chat. I think Irene, the answer to that.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
I will send all those link to this audience later. Also, case lookup, I already sent it, but when other thing, I will send it.
Okay, no one wants to take a guess. I'll just reveal the number.
In the chat, or maybe you
Yeah,
can turn on your mics.
there you go. So it's $16,000 for one case study. That's their budget. And that is kind of insane, but that just goes to tell how important and how much emphasis they're putting on their case studies, right? And also at the end, ask their lead content designer if there's anything else he wanted to add, and he said that it's still more of an art than a science to actually write case studies. So that's quite interesting. Also, interestingly enough, Simon Penn said almost the same thing. It's the art of writing case studies. So that's what I'm gonna try to unpack for you to here today. So the art of writing case studies. So we first need to find out what kind of skills they're looking for if we want to actually communicate that we have the skills to do the job. So you can either go into the job post to see if you can uncover that there, which can be hard sometimes because job posts are usually a copy of a copy of a copy. So they go into a job post and just get inspiration from other companies' job posts, and that's usually how it's done these days. Another way to actually go and find out is to understand career progression frameworks and to see what's expected of you at each level. So let me share that. Yeah, so here's an example of a framework by Peter Meerholz. He's the author of Org Design for Design Orgs. And these frameworks are usually internal documents, so it's not easy to find them online. But I have two documents or two examples that are public, so I can include those, Irem, so I can send those over to you.
That
You can share.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so, but basically what you'll have is, so it's difficult to see on the screen now, so you can, when Irem send you the links, you can go and dig in and you can look at your level and you can understand what the skills that are required for you basically at each level. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, but basically you have a rubric like this. You have the skills on the left-hand side, and then you'll have the levels at the top right there. So you have associate, which is entry level or junior, key, which is a mid-level, and senior, lead, and principal. So you can also see that sometimes the naming is also can vary sometimes. You'll have you'll have to sort of try to distill that on your own there, but it's usually similar, at least in the way it's laid out chronologically. Okay, so here we have a common individual contributor career ladder, and some of these names, as I said, might vary. So you have associate and junior, for example, but I just call it entry level. And to make it as simple as possible, here's what I think you should focus on within your case studies. So if you're an entry level, then your focus should be on exploration and experimentation within your projects. So instead of fixating on one solution, you should show a range of solution and then tell us why you chose a specific solution over the others. Because at this level, you're not actually expected to have a strategic say in product design. I'm not saying you can't have that in your case study. I'm just saying you're not expected to have that. But obviously, if you can go beyond what's expected of you, that's a good thing. So I'll cover the other stages here as well. So once you're reached mid-level, after a couple of years, then you should have a bit more experience under your belt, and you've developed a more outcome-centric mindset, and you can prove your impact with metrics. Okay, that would be KPIs, for instance. And then after a few years, once you reach senior level, then you should be able to prove your value with, as I said, with outcomes and how you impacted the product strategy and direction. And then at lead level, you'll be expected to have outcomes, strategy, and also management skills. And not only people management skills, which is a different track, but you should know how to manage stakeholders, manage expectations, etc., etc. And now this is a high-level overview of what I think you should focus on in your case studies, but I would also read the job description and look at the career progression frameworks that Irem is going to send you, so you can understand how you can clearly communicate your value and also your ambitions. And one last thing I'd like to mention, and this applies across all levels, is that you should demonstrate that you understand the problems that you're trying to solve. So there's a saying, a problem well stated is a problem half solved, and that is 100% true, and people in the industry know that. Okay, so now that you know what to focus on in your case studies, here's a super simple case study structure that you can follow, and try to say that 5 times in a row, super simple case study structure. But I'm going to browse through each section real quick with questions that you might get asked in an interview, for example, or a portfolio review. And I can actually send you, Irene, the Notion template as well, because I have this as a Notion template, so you can use that. Yeah. Okay, so for the executive summary, this is basically for busy people, and that would be recruiters or hiring managers. And it's a summary of the problem, process, solution, and the impact, and also preferably a link to a prototype or a live product. Then you'll go ahead and explain your role. If you're entry level or mid-level, then I wouldn't pay that much attention to this. You could obviously mention your role within your project, but you don't have to go too in depth. But if you're senior or lead, then you can be a little bit more detailed in this section. Then you have the problem. So what problem are we trying to solve? So show that you actually understand the problem. How did we figure out that's the problem in the first place? What was the pre-research problem? So it's common for problems to change throughout the UX process. So you might start with one problem, and then when you do research, you might end up with a completely different problem that you're trying to solve. And then what was the post-research problem? Then at the process level, what was the research? What decisions were made? Why were those decisions made? And what iterations were made? And when you come to the solution, so why did you choose that specific solution? How does that solution solve the problem? And what were the range of other possible solutions? So this is where you can go in depth. If you're a junior or mid-level, you can sort of show the range of other possible solutions, and it's important that you dig into why you chose that specific solution over the others. And also the outcome, in what way did your work create an impact? How did you measure that impact? And can you show metrics, testimonials, or any other proof of your outcome? And also your learnings or takeaways from that project. That could also function as outcomes, at least outcomes for you, personal outcomes. So outcomes is a bit tricky, because if you haven't worked on a live project, it's difficult to have impact metrics, but there's always a way to sort of get around that. You could ask for testimonials. You could use quotes from your user research, for example, and there's all sorts of tricks, I would say, that you could use to sort of highlight your outcome. Okay, so it's important that we have this, and also you should state that at the top as well within the executive summary, as I said. And one last thing, just don't bore people with process, tell stories. People like to be entertained. So narrow the scope, have a clear structure, embrace conflict, tension, and failure, etc., etc. So to illustrate this, we have Ali from the community I'm running called Case Study Club. And he set a list of he had a list of he had an A list and B list of companies that he wanted to apply for. And in the beginning, he sort of set himself up to apply for the B list because he wanted to save himself, like he wanted to get some momentum going, and he wanted to practice before he went on to the B list. So he did that, but unfortunately, he didn't even hear back from the B list. So that was kind of a bummer. So he went back to the drawing board. He got his story straight, and he asked for feedback within our community and also the hiring companies, and it turned out that he had a very dry and process-oriented portfolio. So people were very bored, and he weren't having any fun with it himself. So Ali, he flipped things around. He got rid of many of the heavy process slides. He started to focus in on stories within the project itself, and he went on to apply for both the B list and also the A list. And now we finally started to hear back from them, and he eventually landed 3 offers. And another thing about stories is that you could think of it as, you've probably heard that you should do like a hero's journey and stuff like that. That's all good if you can sort of, if your project fits within the hero's journey, but it doesn't always happen that way, right? So you don't always have that hero's journey. So instead, I would focus in on anecdotes, actually. So that would be smaller stories within your project. So think of it as like the story I just told about Ali. That is an anecdote, right? You can use those throughout your case study, and that would sort of be a complete story once you have all of those anecdotes in place. And but I'm not a master storyteller by any means, but I read a couple of books on the topic, and I've written a lot, also a lot of case studies. So yeah, I've picked up a few tricks and tips here and there.
Let's see.
But to communicate, to summarize, the number 1 is that you should communicate that you have the skills to do the job, and also reflect your level of seniority. And the best case studies are story-based. Okay, do you have some more time for the last section? Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and cover the last section, which is the most common designer challenge, and that is imposter syndrome. So 70% of all professionals will experience imposter syndrome at one point in their career. So I did this talk, I think it was a couple of months ago, and I had a poll done within that. So or a survey. So I think you can do that on, I don't know if you can do that on the on this version you have here, because now you're doing the webinar thing, right?
Yeah, right now I'm checking, but we don't have
Yeah,
all
but
right now.
yeah. So I did. So I polled people in the audience. We were 100 people, and I think it was 93% of the people in the audience had experienced imposter syndrome. So my hypothesis was that designers are even more prone to imposter syndrome, and it turned out to be true. So it's actually a lot higher within the designers. And you probably heard the phrase "fake it till you make it," which is a popular statement in the tech industry.
My favorite quote.
Yeah, your favorite quote. But the problem with adopting this kind of mindset is that right there from the beginning, you're actually implying that you're faking it,
Yeah,
right?
I still don't believe I can do things. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah. So, but I think it's better to be honest. And I have to credit Chris, a good friend of mine, who's also a part of Case Study Club. He gave a talk about imposter syndrome, and I want to just share a quick story before we wrap up on this very topic, because this is Alex. He's another member of Case Study Club. He used to be a senior product designer at Oracle, but he wanted new challenges and to go into a company where he could grow into a more senior level. And late last year, he started applying for jobs and got invited for portfolio reviews. And in the reviews or interviews, they asked him about the iterations and user testing. The only problem was that he hadn't conducted any user tests because that wasn't part of Oracle's culture. So he actually tried to sort of fake it. And needless to say, he never got invited back to the next rounds because the interviews could actually see through that because they know how this works, right? But knowing his weakness, Alex, he flipped things around and did another round of interview with 5 or 6 companies. So this time, when they asked him about the user tests, he was 100% honest about it. So instead of faking it, he told them what he would have done differently if given the chance. So after shifting this strategy, he received 2 offers shortly thereafter. And this is a problem I hear all the time from designers. They want to add user testing to their projects because they haven't done any user testing. But the truth is, being honest about it just flat out works. So just say what you would have done instead if given the chance. Then you can sort of have a plan about it, how you would have sort of conducted a user test, and that would be so much better than trying to sort of fit it in after the project is done, because that usually doesn't work. All right, so to summarize, don't fake it till you make it. Sometimes you can actually fake it till you make it, but try not to, because by implying that you're faking it, you're actually setting yourself up to even have a stronger imposter syndrome. So be honest. It's okay not to know everything sometimes. And what would you do instead if given the chance? So this is probably the shortest lessons of all the 3. But if there's one thing I'd like to take away from this, I think this is probably it. So that's all I had for you today. So I'm up for connecting with you on LinkedIn. You can message me there if you'd like. I'd always love to chat. And in addition, as Reem said, I run Case Study Club, which is a free newsletter where I write and curate UX case studies, which I send out every other Monday. So you can check that out at casestudy.club. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. I just took lots of them for myself, especially fake it until you make it. We have question on chat.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said there is absolutely true. So if you're a student, I would call myself an entry level or junior designer, because entry level or junior, they're basically the same thing, but or associate for that matter. But entry level is sort of the first, that's the entry into sort of the level, that's the first level. So if you're sort of working your way into getting your first job, then I would classify you as a junior designer or entry level designer, or yeah.
One other question.
Do you think this kind of approach to designer career depends on the culture you work in? Yeah, I think it absolutely depends on the, if you mean like the company culture or team culture, or do you mean country culture, or so it's different kind of culture, country culture. No, not really. I think in Turkey, big companies like especially tech companies, they do have levels like this, no matter where you are in the world. So you'll have levels like this if you go to Turkey, or if you go to Tokyo, or if you go to San Francisco or Melbourne, Australia, wherever in the world. If you're in a tech company, a mature tech company, they'll have levels like this for the tech department. So yeah, but if it's a startup and you're the first hire, then they won't necessarily have like a set level system like that. But in as you grow and mature, then and the team is getting bigger, then there's a need to incorporate those levels, so everyone's on the same page to sort of as to where you're at in terms of your levels of, also not only in terms of your responsibilities, but also in terms of your salary range. So that reflects back onto the levels.
Yeah, we have a Turkish example of big companies. Getir. Did you heard of Getir before?
Can you say that again?
It's called Getir. It's a food tech company going globally now, right now in USA, I guess, and some of European cities. Okay, we have another question.
Yeah, I would put you in that bucket of designer. Yes. So, but you're transitioning from interior design, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And also, I mean, I transitioned myself like 12 years ago from graphic design. So I know how that feels like. So yeah, I can relate to that, definitely. I would say that having experience from another design field is actually a good thing. So you can actually incorporate a lot of your previous learnings from your interior design as interior designer into UI UX design. I would definitely say that. And also you could play that to your strength in terms of the company that you're actually positioning yourself towards. So if you want, you can sort of, there are plenty of startups that are in the architectural space or in the interior space, for example. And if you have a background as an interior designer, then I think that would be hugely beneficial. Yeah, I can just share another story on that, because here in Norway, that was actually a friend of mine. She used to work in this huge, it's huge to be in Norwegian terms. They were like almost like Google, but back in the days when internet was sort of very early and young. So they hired a bunch of librarians to work as UX designers for their to handle all their categories within the search engine. Because if you worked as a librarian, then you're super structured in terms of the information architecture, right? Because that's one of the core skills of being a librarian. So they hired a bunch of librarians to come and work for them and to solve those issues with the information architecture. So that's I just want to share that.
Great story. Any more questions? Or anything you want to say to Jan?
How do you say thank you in Turkish, by the way?
Teşekkür ederim.
Teşekkür ederim.
Let me write it in chat. Thank you a lot for being here with us tonight. We are so glad to listen to you and talk to you. And definitely would like to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I had a quick look at what you're doing. So I visited your circle forum. So I saw that you have a circle forum as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then you also talk about no code and all that good stuff. That's really cool. I'm also into that stuff. So
Really?
let's
Do you have a website portfolio made in Webflow, like a lot of us trying to do right now these days?
I mean, I have in the community Case Study Club, we have a lot of people working on their portfolio in Webflow, and Case Study Club is actually built on Webflow, so that's also cool. And yeah, I use a lot of no-code tools like Zapier and Outseta for client logins and stuff like that. So, and yeah, I think it's awesome. So one thing to note about portfolios and Webflow is that but since you're in a good community and you've got people helping you, then that makes it a lot easier. But if you're trying to sort of sit by yourself and try to figure it out by yourself, then it's a lot harder and difficult. So this is a bit of a learning curve. But if you're seems to be in a good hands here, so yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Jan, if you want to stay here, you are more than welcome. But when we talked earlier, you said you had another meeting. So sadly, we can let you go and saying goodbye if you want.
Thank you for having me. And I'd love to be on again sometime soon.
All right. See you
Okay.
later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.